Stellar has a loud target attached to it, but the mechanism behind that target still needs proof. The headline target is loud, but the real work is testing what facts support it right now. How much could is the search phrase that fits this story, because a $1,500 thought experiment for XLM is less about a guaranteed payoff and more about how different price scenarios change value if Stellar actually expands usage. That matters for traders chasing upside, but it matters even more for anyone trying to separate an investable setup from a story built mostly on projection. The real problem is that a projected upside number can travel faster than the facts needed to support it. Start with the mechanism. Because XLM has a large circulating supply, big price jumps need more capital than smaller tokens, which limits extreme moves even when payment narratives are strong. In plain English, the story is balancing a future target against what is actually live today, because a forecast only matters if the mechanism behind it can be measured. That is why the difference between a chart target and an adoption signal matters. One is a forecast. The other is evidence arriving in real time. That is why a move like this can look exciting on the surface and still carry far more risk once you ask who is actually providing the liquidity, the capital, the legal cover, or the operational support. The context matters too. Example outcomes run from roughly 30 cents to $2 and ties the upside case to stronger adoption in global payments, stablecoins, and financial infrastructure. That backdrop is important because speculative markets often borrow credibility from a bigger theme before they have earned it themselves. That is exactly why some targets travel farther on social media than they do in the market itself. For people searching how much could, that bigger backdrop is useful because it explains why this story landed now instead of last month. But context is not the same thing as proof. Here is the split between what is firm and what still needs more evidence. A $1,500 thought experiment for XLM is less about a guaranteed payoff and more about how different price scenarios change value if Stellar actually expands usage. Those scenarios do not prove that demand will arrive, especially with competing payment networks chasing the same use case. That is the line between a narrative that can mature and a narrative that simply burns hot for a few sessions. Viewers can easily mistake a live headline, a chart move, or a product announcement for a complete answer when it may only be the first visible piece. So who feels this first? That matters for traders chasing upside, but it matters even more for anyone trying to separate an investable setup from a story built mostly on projection. In practical terms, the market is now being asked to price not only the headline event, but also the follow-through. Execution risk, adoption risk, liquidity quality, legal clarity, or recovery credibility, depending on how the next few sessions unfold. If the follow-through is weak, the market usually starts to treat the forecast as marketing instead of analysis. That is where a speculative setup either graduates into a real market story or gets exposed as a temporary attention trade. The next proof point is not the loudest claim. It is this: watch whether real payment integrations and stablecoin activity on Stellar grow fast enough to matter beyond chart speculation. For this video, the most useful close is a concrete one. Watch whether real payment integrations and stablecoin activity on Stellar grow fast enough to matter beyond chart speculation. If that signal appears, the story gets stronger. If it does not, the current read can fade quickly. The next clean read on how much could is not a louder slogan. It is whether the next measurable step confirms the same pressure, demand, or trust signal that made this headline matter in the first place.